How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to be talking about setting expectations with your work partner on the job. Guys, this is a very key dialogue. We've touched on this before, but it's been a while, and, perspectives grow. Maybe in some cases they could change, depending. So I thought it was a topic we could revisit because it was requested. We had an email recently where the person said, hey, Gangi, I'm having trouble working with my partner. Do you have any advice? I don't want to say specifically what the concern is because I don't want people to find out who sent it to me. But having said that, I did give him a link to the older episode, but I thought it's something that we could visit again. I'm going to have Joe Pomponio on, and we're going to discuss, working with your partner, trying to build some good relationships with you and the person you're going to be working alongside for probably many years. I know a lot of partners that have worked together for many years because they get it. They get what each other expects. And this is going to be a good dialogue. We'll give you some tips to kind of keep the relationship going, but I would like to give you some tips on perspective too from both sides. I think this will be a good dialogue. Now, guys, real quick, just want to go over my sponsors. We have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you're looking to get a degree, please check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And guys, they want to bring people with experience into the classroom. So that's the evolution of education, bringing people with experience into the classroom so they can teach tomorrow, technically. And I just got done speaking at Seton Hall, guys. They're thirsty, man. They want real knowledge that goes beyond those books. So, guys, if you get a chance, check out American Military University. Guys, my books are available on the market. We have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That is available on the market. The link to that is on in my description. It's on Amazon. Book is doing very well, by the way. That book always does well. This book is starting to catch up, starting to get some steam, but my other book, where is it? Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration, just a bunch of tips in this book. Book's doing well as well. If you guys are interested in getting that book is available in the description as well. You can see the link to that and then hook onto Amazon because that's where the link's going to take you. And we also have these posters. Those are available. 18 signs you're overly involved with an inmate. If you're interested in getting those posters, you're going to email nassahs22@gmail.com. That's going to be the same email that you're going to email for the Tier Talk on-demand webinars. We have a few available right now. We got, just to let you guys know, this one is already available. Where is it? Sorry, guys. Here it is. That's the leadership webinar, 5 levels of leadership. This is part 1. It's a webinar that is off of John Maxwell's book, 5 Levels of Leadership. It's a great discussion. It's the first part of 5. Let me just get back to myself here. It's the first part of 5. And this one runs about 2 hours and 13 minutes. And the reason why I have it on demand is because I will send you the link based on your schedule. So if you're a department and you're looking to get it for your people, just let me know and I can go ahead and send them a link that will work with their schedule so you're not emptying out your whole facility to attend one piece of training. And again, that's part 1 and it's $75 a person. And if you are interested in getting that, these are the email. This is the email, same email as the poster, nassahs22@gmail.com. They're the ones that will go ahead and tell you how to make the payment, and then they'll forward you to me, and then I will ask you, what's the best time and date for you, and then I'll go ahead and send you the link. And if you miss it, just let me know, and I'll resend it again. That's not an issue. And we also have another one, and it's about navigating your impact on rookie staff. That is actually done filming. That was put together because of the need for retention, because even though they're rookie staff and they're new, we want to keep them in the system once they're there. So we developed a PowerPoint that's really built on experiences. But then what I did was I shifted away from the PowerPoint on that one. That's just going to be a dialogue, even though the outline is coming from that PowerPoint. Me and Sandy Hassan kind of just have a dialogue and really share personal experiences that we believe will help you understand the mindset of our rookie staff, including the new ones that are coming in, and then what we can do to add value to them, to make them know that they also add value to us, and to work with our middle managers and our supervisors, because that's the key to creating that environment. So well, the presentation, because for this one, I don't use a PowerPoint. For the other one, we do. For the first one, we do. For this one, it's a presentation that's really based on 3 points. The one is going to be, how do we add value to them? The second is, how do we let them know that they add value to us? And then the third is upping the game, because we have to create a culture that works with an environment for them to be cultivated and grow, help them reach their greatest potential. So that's when you come to working with your managers and your supervisors. But this was a great dialogue as well. They're both good training. I'm going to have Joe, who's on tonight's show, I'm going to send him the link to the first one today, the 5 levels of leadership, and he'll break down a review and put something up on social media, as he always does for us. Let me just get him in. Joe, what's up, brother?
What's happening, brother?
Joe, I know you can't talk specifically. Let me just say good luck on your new job. I really do truly wish you the best. And for the agency that took Joe, you could not have a better person that you could trust in that position. I would trust Joe with my life, because Joe was all about integrity. And I'll tell you, Joe, if I was the agency, man, I would be honored to have you, Joe. I love what you do. Always have.
I appreciate you, brother. I feel the same about you.
Oh man, we got to see each other a little more. I was afraid. I didn't want to bother you because of the new job.
Nah. I'm doing a little bit of everything right now until some things get settled out. But it's definitely good to be back in the saddle, man. I'm having a blast. Back in the saddle,
a little Texas lingo there.
Back in the saddle again.
Hey, Jay, mind introducing yourself again?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Corrections of 30 years. Current panel member here for Tier Talk with Anthony Gangi, and just recently got back into the corrections game, working in a local sheriff's department and doing some things there, man, and just having a blast. Forgot how much I actually missed it. As you can tell behind me, my duty belt's no longer hanging on the wall. I'm retirement. So yeah, if you see it right over my chow hall plate there, man, it's gone. It's back there on the dresser waiting for me to put her on again.
Well, you look happy, Joe. You really do. I saw the pictures too. You look great, brother. You really do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, you do, man. And then, Joe, this is a good topic. We're going to be discussing. Let me get the banner right. My partner. Well, is that what I put down? My partner is the worst. So basically, we're going to talk about.
Partner is the worst.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about working with a partner, kind of developing something, consistency. Now, right off the bat, guys, when some facilities may not operate this way. Some agencies may not allow officers to bid because the thing is, they don't want too much complacency. And what they assume is if you keep somebody in the same bid for too long, they could become complacent, especially in the relationships with the inmates. So they do like to move people around. On the adverse of that, some people do like consistency in the unit. They believe that the officers will remain professional. And what they do is they allow the officers to bid on post. And technically, it's really you're bidding on the days. But having said that, you're also bidding on the post. Let's not lie, because some posts you may not want the weekend because I just don't want that post. And guys, by the way, one post being harder than the other, that's always been subjective to me. It just depends on what you're looking to do. Some people love units. Some people love running around and being that manpower, maybe because they just want to kind of learn more of the facility. Some people are just happy just having control of that unit and just being in their own world, whatever floats your boat. For me, I was a mover. I hated units. And then I've worked with people that didn't want to be a mover, and they wanted to be in units because they wanted to have, kind of a more steady level of control. But hey, Joe, let me ask you a question before we get into the dialogue here. Let's talk about the difference first, just so people understand. I don't know how your facilities worked in the past, but did you have bidded post, or did they kind of give you the days, but you frequented yourself? You frequented post. Basically, you were assigned by operations daily, so you didn't know what you were walking into each day.
Well, in Texas, you basically put in for what you want. It's not bidding on a post per se. Like, most of the states that have bids on post are, under some sort of collective bargaining agreement. Texas does not have that because we don't have a union down here. So any tenured employee can put in for whatever shift they want. Posts are normally assigned by the supervisor. So, it's one of those things where our post orders as lieutenants stated that we put people in places, in accordance with their job capabilities. So if you were an officer that did a good job in SEG, or, you did a good job running center hall or control center, That's generally where we kept you until, you know, we got some new blood that we can start training. We put them with those veteran officers to kind of learn, because it's always good to have a well-rounded ship that can work anywhere and everywhere that you put them. But yeah, to bid on post and days and nights, and we don't have all that here. You just basically put your name on the list, and, you know, as a vacancy comes up, you get that shift. But there's no bidding on post or anything like that down here because we don't have a CBA. You know, like I said, we don't have a union down here, so we don't have.
I mean, either way, it's good. I mean, you get the consistency, but if you are frequenting around, if there's not bidded post, and the good thing about that is you also get to learn a lot about the total operations of a facility because you're moving around. You're not
absolutely, and that's where your training comes in, because you want to train your staff to be, you know, flexible in all positions. You know, that's what makes your shift a well-rounded and well-running shift, and, you know, it also alleviates a lot of headaches for the supervisors if you train your staff properly. You don't want just one person, you know, being responsible for central control, or just one person being responsible for SEG, because, you know, something may happen and that one person may not be at work. God forbid something happens medically and they're out for an extended period of time. Then you're left scrambling to try to find somebody to pick up the slack. And that's where your training comes in, to make sure that they're trained in all areas, you know, just for that. And, you know, when you train them, make sure you train them and apply it, you know, put them in those spots. Make sure they get the hands-on application, because training them for an area and not giving them the experience of that area doesn't do you any good.
Right. And then I agree with that. I mean, I've seen people that could run the hell out of a housing unit, but then when they were forced to work overtime in another position, they were a little confused. So you basically could see their seniority because they were an expert in this one area, and it's great. You need those type of experts. Don't get me wrong. They knew the inmates in that housing unit. They really had a very specific knowledge of expertise. But when they worked overtime and they were forced or whatever to work in a position that was outside that unit, you could see them scrambling, and they would feel a little level of uncomfortability, and they would want to switch up with somebody to go back to work in the housing.
Yeah, or even you know, something outside their normal shift hours. You know, you take a night shift boss and you keep them over for 4 or 5 hours for overtime on day shift. You know, that's a whole different animal, man. Things are a little different. They're not, you know, sleeping and you know, just doing the sleeping and 30-minute security checks, man. You're feeding chows, you're getting people ready for work and that kind of stuff. So yeah. I mean, especially when you take them outside their normal shift hours, it's definitely a deal. But you know, I was like you. I was a mover, man. I hated sitting still. I'd run 3 units before I'd volunteer to go inside one picket.
Right, and I'll be honest with you, that for me, again, I just didn't like sitting down, which you know, when I just knew there was so much more out there. But again, I also obviously give credit to those that stay in those units too, because that's a very hard job to be surrounded by the inmate population and just constantly have to deal with the burdens of working a unit, because it's not easy. It's not. I mean, that's another thing of being able to move around a little bit more, especially if you're the general assignment type officer, because the general assignment type officer may not be overwhelmed with that because they're not trapped in the unit. So there's some level of freedom there. But now let's talk about partnerships. So technically, guys, even though I opened up the dialogue saying that the specific partner could be, let's say, someone that you're working a unit with, there's relationships all over the place. I like to think that we're partnerships at every level. Me working with my supervisor is a certain level of a partnership. You know, me working with the GAs or the general assignment officers is a certain level of partnership. So, I mean, to be honest with you, even though we may pull some examples from where we see partnerships really in motion, which could be partners running a housing unit, and the reason why you can really see the outcome of consistency or inconsistency in partnerships of a housing unit is because of the inmate population and where they tend to go when there's inconsistency, or where they tend not to go when the people working together are consistent. But I mean, Joe, just in short, Joe, I mean, obviously outside of a working housing unit, what other type of partnerships could you see? I mean, us with custody, just in higher level, working with the other departments like medical or classification. I mean, what type of partnerships do we really see at the highest of levels?
Well, I mean, you see them, especially, you know, not just in security or custody. I mean, you have partnerships. You have partnerships with medical. You got partnerships with classification. You know, you have partnerships with your security threat group people. You know, partnerships play a big pivotal role in everyday custody operations. You know, from the CO level on up to your, you know, your wardens. You know, you have to have that clear line of communication. You got to have that partnership with them people in order to basically facilitate your normal daily operations. You know, not one person can cover all aspects of something, of a situation. You know, there may be times where you got to have classifications help. There's going to be times where you need medicals help, and there's some times where you need education's help. You know, one of my biggest partnerships for me as a supervisor was classification education, especially when you're dealing with offenders that were, you know, borderline, considered borderline disabled, and, you know, with their IQ score, and here they are, we got them in Gen Pop, and you know they're not going to make it. So, you know, it's our responsibility to look after them. But yeah, I mean, having a partnership just doesn't go with, you know, a picket boss to a floor boss, or, you know, a sergeant to a lieutenant, or a sergeant to a CO. You know, your partnerships are further reaching than just your immediate area.
Right. And I think that's what I want. That's the kind of big part of the discussion that we want to get out. The fact is that it's partnership. It's developed relationships that go across all boards, horizontal and vertical. And I think even as we discuss this, I think it's good for us to know that what we see on the more immediate level, and as we discuss, let's say the more immediate level with the partnership amongst the, let's say the two officers working the unit, you could find will easily apply to things at all levels. You know, if you're stretching across the different departments, or if you're going up all the way through management. So right off the bat, there's a lot of variables that come into play, because again, partnerships are really dealing with people, and, you know, people are different. So having said that, you got to kind of understand right off the bat who you're working with and what is their level of expertise or their status in the department. I'll give you an example. If I'm working with somebody new, my expectations may not be as high. If I'm working with somebody that is senior and veteran, my expectations may be a bit higher than it would be for a rookie. But like right off the bat, let's discuss expectations. For me, when I started this profession as a rookie, and I was assigned a housing unit in which I had a partner, or even when I came into the profession and was just looking to get to know the job, I came in humble and I asked people, what do you expect from me here? Like, whatever my position is, I need to learn it. So the best way for me to learn it is to see what your expectations are. Because yes, I've been to the academy and I know policy and procedure, but I have yet to see them applied. So with that said, expectations are key. And that's even if you're two senior officers getting ready to work together, you know, or a supervisor and an officer, or a department with another department. How big are expectations, Joe? I mean, how important is that?
Expectations are personalized, given on the person who's doing the expectating. I think when it comes to partnerships, and I think the bigger word that needs to be applied is compromise. Not two people are the same. Not two people have the same kind of work ethic, or the same work style, or same personality. So your bigger contributing factors in a new partnership is compromise and communication. Expectations, everybody has expectations, and they're not always met. You know, I've seen senior level officers who you would think and you would have high expectations of, not so much, because some were just dead set in their ways and some were lazy. And, you know, the ones I had lower expectations for some of the newer officers wound up coming out to be gladiators, man, like workhorses. So, you know, expectations, I think, are based on your personal feelings of what you expect for yourself, not what others expect of you.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I always love working with expectations, because, as you said, Joe just hit it really well, is it's something that's within you. So there's reasons as to why you want to meet those expectations. And by the way, you know, I think that if I went up to Joe and I said, hey, Joe, what do you expect from me in regards to working with you? Joe would, of course, coach me and tell me what would work for him. But I think in return, Joe will also think, you know, what would you expect, you know, from me as a senior? How can I best help you? How can I add value to your workday, knowing that you're new? And again, you know, as I said, even if you're seniors, I think it's great to start off with those levels of expectations for each other. And the reason why you're having those levels of expectation is because every time you have that dialogue of expectation, you're bringing things closer to something consistent, which means that you guys are finding unison. You guys are starting to see how you're able to move without really, there's always going to be communication. Don't get me wrong, but hear me out. It's great to see people move because they know each other well and they know how to move like it's a dance. You know what I mean? I know if you go here, I got to go here because we've already established your communication and we kind of just know how it works. And I've seen that. I've worked with officers, I've worked with supervisors, and you just, they know what to expect from you. You know what to expect from them. And then just you're moving, man. You're just, this person's here, you're here, and very little has to be said because it's already been said and those expectations are being met. And would you agree to that, Joe? As you start to discuss those expectations, you start to see the inconsistencies kind of break away and you start to see us coming closer and closer together in unison.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, when you discuss your expectations with each other, you know, any new partnership, there's going to be bumps. And, you notice right off the bat that you guys are trying to do the same thing at the same time. And like you said, when you discuss your expectations and you clearly line out what needs to happen, you can turn a partnership into synchronized dancing where, it's a perfect flow of daily operations. There's a big difference between a partnership and putting somebody with somebody to train. When somebody's thrown with you to train, that's exactly what your job is, to train them. When somebody's been through the training, they've been through the academy, they've been through, let's say an officer is coming from night shift to day shift. It's not necessarily new training for them. It's just a new dynamic for them. Same job, new dynamic. And it's your job to line out what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing it. And, after a period of time, once the roughness and the newness wears off, they learn to bob and weave with you. And they know, well, if he's over there getting education ready as a key officer or a picket boss, then I need to go ahead and make sure that my next shot of rec is ready. You find out that instead of the picket boss or somebody telling you what to do, you already know what's coming next. So you got yourself into that flow in that partnership, and that's basically what you want to achieve.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too. When I was a more senior officer and I worked with newer individuals, when we had those levels of expectation as a senior officer, I would find myself working with them more in my efforts to lift the person up and kind of put them onto that senior level, because that's not going to happen right away. And I want to mention something, let's say running a unit. Running a unit is a finesse. It really is. Running a unit is a finesse because you have to balance the regulations and the rules, but you also have to balance some level of discretion, because at the end of the day, you are going to be writing people up all day if you are just letting the rules run the unit. And to be honest with you, I'm not saying to not abide by the rules, but hear with me. If you're a senior officer, you understand exactly what I'm saying. You'll be writing up things all day if you are sitting there just sweating every little thing that's expected of you. I'm saying as a senior officer, because again, you've gotten some time in, you got that respect, you kind of understand the consequences of certain things, what's more severe, what isn't, what are the things that you can mitigate with, and you develop discretion through that experience where a rookie won't. So they have to develop that. They're not going to have that discretion right away. And I think it's something that comes through time. So if I had a rookie that came my way and we're looking to develop some level of consistency, I'm going to actually lean towards how I need that offer to how that rookie officer needs to operate on day one, which means that if I, as a senior officer, I'm not going to say I was laxed, but let's say as a senior officer, I got ways of maneuvering based on experience that doesn't sweat everything, because with my amount of time in, I understand how the unit runs. I don't always have to run to the rule book to get stuff done. But when you're new, you are running to that rule book. That is your foundation of where those choices are going to be coming from. That's your strength. So now, with that said, if you're a senior officer and you're dealing with that new boot, then what I would do that day, if you're working together, this way the inmates don't see any inconsistency and a way to circumvent, playing the mommy and daddy game. Mommy said no, daddy will say yes. You operate on that same level as that officer, the rookie officer, because you're doing that to aid that rookie officer. So if today we're running a strict housing unit, I will go back and tell those inmates, hey guys, today I got Joe. Joe is new. So we're going to operate this facility at the highest, or we're going to operate this unit today at the highest of levels. So be wary of that, be ready for that, because at this day I got to support my man, because right now I got to introduce him to, how this thing rolls. And if I'm not here, I'm expecting my man to say no to anything he's unsure of, or this officer's female officer to say no to anything they're unsure of. So today we're operating at the highest of levels, and then eventually we could always, bring it down. But for the first time around with a rookie officer, I would tell the senior officer to kind of go to them and say, listen, I get it. You're new. So what I'm going to do is, so there's no confusion here, I already told my side today that we're operating by policy and procedure to the fullest of levels, because I got to get that foundation for you. And the last thing I want to do, because hear me out, guys, if you don't do that right away, then what's going to happen is they're going to, get mad, because this officer right now is trying to figure out how the system works. So they're operating by the book, which is expected. And if you're a supervisor, you should be expecting those charges coming your way, because those inmates are going to test this individual. So they got to set that firm ground and make sure they have the ability to say no. And I get it, that's at first, but you don't want to be lenient on your side, because then that officer's no becomes weak. So you have to be able to support that officer in their effort to first adjust to what they're doing, giving them the ability to say no, because the last thing you want to do to a new boot, and this is important to me, is circumvent them. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to be perfect. They're going to be making mistakes, and that's fine. You can go back, chat with them, and you can empower that rookie to go back and fix that mistake, so they don't look like they lose face. But with that said, if their no is a legit no, and it's like, well, I wouldn't have said no to that because every day, back them up, because let them get into the groove of saying no. That is not an easy thing to do. Let them get in the groove of saying no, and then eventually we could lessen up. But I think for me, that would be my advice at first. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? Because it could be controversial. Some people may think opposite of that.
Yeah, and I don't want to say I think totally opposite of it. I've never been one to go into a block and have a discussion with inmates and tell them I got a new boss coming in and giving them that speech. I would, my normal operation, my normal procedure was I would sit the new officers down, because, most of the time I'd get 3 or 4 out of a class on a new shift, and I'd tell them, look, to me, as far as write-ups, it's your area, your call. For me, these are my 3 zero tolerance that you will write a disciplinary for. No ands, ifs, or buts. One was sexual misconduct, one was possession of a weapon, and the other one is for fighting. Of course, that's going to be a no-brainer. And I would tell the officers, I would actually let them see the process. I would walk down the runs with them. And, you got the convicts that would be hanging stuff up after hours or just little covering up their lights, stupid little shit like that. And, I'd knock on that door, tell them to get that shit down. And, then I'd have the discussion. Could I write that inmate up? Absolutely. I would also let them know that, you can write the case. Either way, I'm going to back your play. But, I would also teach them that verbal communication, verbal judo, and, you teach them over time that they gain respect by having that direct dialogue with the inmate versus seeing an infraction and writing a case on it and driving on. To me, you really don't gain any respect in the inmate community that way versus dealing with it face to face, saying, hey, that you're not supposed to have that shit over your light. Get it down, leave it down. If I see you again, I'm going to bless your game. And then the inmate knows, okay, he's not playing. Now, we did that without the use of a disciplinary, and to me, I believe that gains you more respect amongst your peers, amongst your supervisors, and amongst the inmate community, because you're willing to deal with that face-to-face versus teaching an officer to just write a blank ticket and go on about their business and not even addressing it, verbally to begin with. But, that's just me, though.
No, I agree. So let me clarify something. So I definitely don't mean we're writing out blank tickets. Of course, we're going to have a face-to-face. I just think my thing is this, is that I think when the inmates know what the rules are, and it's like when you have a substitute teacher in, when the person's coming in there new, they're going to try to maneuver. And I think that the first thing that's being tested of that rookie is going to be, can they deliver the no? That's what's being tested. Can they deliver the no? And I want to see that from the rookie as well. For me,
absolutely.
I want to see that.
Yeah.
So having said that, you're right. Of course, that's something that to me through time, work it down. But right now, that's not what I'm testing, because my thing is this. If you haven't established some level of credibility with delivering that no, then my thing is that compromise could be seen as being weak at first. You have to kind of develop a foundation of, can I say no? Because as I said, these inmates know the rules better than even us, the senior officers. So when you start coming down the unit and you start seeing that, oh, hey, Gangi's working today, he's new, let's try to see the things that we can get away with. I think, Gangi sets the tone, because the inmates really are just, they're going to test it. First, they're going to test the ability for you to say no, and then they're going to test how you justify your no. So it's like, no, well, why? Well, because the sergeant doesn't like it. Done. That's weak. So I get what you're saying. 100% I do, by the way. So I know that's where, it's kind of controversial. But having said that, I really, for me, for the first couple of days, I want to support sort of a zero tolerance at first. I'm not saying, like, I know what you're saying, Joe. I'm not saying like, you walk in, charge when you see something wrong. I'm saying you give out the directive, and the moment the person refuses it, now you're being, I'm not going to sit there and now you're being charged. So a little bit different what you said, Joe. Basically, it's more like, hey, take that down. No, I'm not going to do that. All right, done.
Yeah.
But now granted, if I was a senior officer, it could be a little something different. Take that down. No, I'm not going to do it. What's going on with you, Joe? What's up? What's up, Mr. Pomponio, whatever it is? What's going on? Because at that point, maybe there's some level of respect. Because don't forget, guys, even when you work in the when you work in the more close custody units, the more restorative housing, obviously that's not run by the pen. That's run by respect, because inmates could get two shits about being charged. But I still feel that there has to be some level of, can this person say no and stand behind it? Because I don't care what anybody says. No is very, very hard to deliver. It's not as easy as people may think it is. Like, I'm going to go in and do this and say no all day. It's not, because these inmates have known ways to circumvent the no. So my biggest concern here is, if you have an officer, trying out that territory and building their confidence and saying no, and then the inmates are like, well, Joe would let me get this off, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Officer Pomponio, and then Pomponio goes back and talks to Gangi and said, hey, Gangi, I know you want to sweat this, but every day we seem to allow it. That really doesn't give the officer a chance to kind of deal with the results of that no and follow through. Because now, if I was the rookie, to be honest with you, two things could happen here. One is I'm going to feel disempowered or disenfranchised. It's like, yo, man, I'm trying to discover some footing here, and you just kind of went against me, and I'm going to see, even though you have a professional relationship with this inmate, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying doing anything wrong. On the extreme side of it, I'm like, yo, you just went against me. You just went against me for something I know I should have written. So technically, the best bet for that senior officer would be to tell the inmate now, hey, I'm sorry, today this is your officer. And, that's how the unit is running. And you mentioned a good point before. What I meant by that is this. We've developed, before you mentioned something about, I want to explain something because you were right on something too. I don't tell the inmates like, hey, we're going to be soft today. I got such and we're going to be harder today. I got such and such running. What I meant to say by that is that if I know I'm working with an officer that's new, I want the inmate population to know I'm supporting this officer. So it's not like it's just more for the inmates to know that they can't come to me if this individual is setting a rule that you don't like. You know, granted, I can always talk to that person later on and say, hey, Joe, how was your day? How did it go? What happened? So when Joe breaks down how the day is going, I could always tell Joe, hey, that was great, but Joe, let me give you some advice on a couple of things, A, B, C, D, and E. But go ahead, you know, give Joe the chance to correct it. Don't go behind Joe's back, because what I want, Joe, and tell me what you think, is that if there is, let's say I make a mistake, right? Or let's say, we'll keep this near. Let's say Joe's the rookie cop. Joe does a couple of things. Then we have a break, and then me and Joe are shooting the shit. And I find that maybe there were some areas that Joe could have policed a little better at. I think it's better if the motivation to correct that change is really dealt with between a dialogue between me and Joe, as opposed to the inmate coming and going around, you know, Joe's back or whoever's back to say, hey, this is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And then you getting involved that way and not giving the chance for the officer to, one, feel empowered to fix it, but two, let's see how they adjust when they make an order that, you know, maybe they could change it up a little bit. How do they go back now and correct that measure without losing face? I'm curious of that as well, because again, if you go back and correct that officer, then all of a sudden the inmates are going to keep on coming to you, and now that officer has no power.
Absolutely.
Know? Yeah, but I get what you're saying too. But what's your thoughts on that perspective, though, Joe? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to back their play no matter what, you know, in front of the offender. And, you know, there's been some times where I put a new officer, let's say, on a cell block, and you know, and I told them what my expectations of them were when they're running day room or you know, for cell searches or what I expect. And, you know, you go down there to do your security check as a supervisor, and you see 3 or 4 convicts in the day room without their shirts on. You know, I'm not gonna front the officer out in front of the offenders. I'm going to front the offenders out in front of the officers. You know, I'll tap on them bars or tap on the glass. Hey, you guys know you're supposed to have your shirts on in that day room. Get your damn shirts on. What are you doing? Do I need to rack y'all up? And right then and there, you know, just a small example like that, you know, your officer knows, oh, okay, he's not playing. Yeah. He means business, and the offenders at the same time know that, shit, the officer didn't even say anything to us about the shirts. I bet that officer's fixing to get smoked after he gets off shift. Yeah. So, you know, it's a perfect example of how you can empower somebody without demeaning their authority or undermining their authority at the same time. Powerful. You know, you get instant compliance from the offender population, and that tells the officer right then and there, okay, I know I need to make sure these guys have their shirts on. I was too busy. I didn't think about it. The guys went to the day room. You know, I'm running rec, I'm running education or library or whatever the case is, and I wasn't paying attention. And okay, so this is something. In each one of those instances, you can empower your officer by doing the things like that without undermining their authority. And eventually they kind of fall into the perspective and in line with what you're trying to guide them to do without demeaning them at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that holds true to almost any relationship that's developed or partnership that's developed in the workplace, whether it's through departments or vertical or horizontal. It's finding the ultimate balance between empowerment and support. You know, absolutely. Through support, you can empower. And again, not an effort to circumvent. Now, mind you, in this case here, I want you to know something too. Even though we as senior officers had shifted how we react, because again, we know where we're at in our career, and that person's not going to be there on day one. So it's quicker for us to make the adjustment than it is to, you know, cultivate this person in day one to that highest level. So that's where the senior officer may compromise a little bit and say, hey, listen, I got to bring this person up. So having said that, they're not going to understand 20 years of experience in one day. But having said that, let me do this. Let me neutralize the ground real quick for all of us. So what's the best way when you neutralize the ground? let's go with the rules and everything first, you know, and let's go ahead and, you know, work from there. Because then eventually the cool thing about it all is that, you know, once they're introduced to it and they move forward after a couple of days, you know, whatever, a couple of weeks, couple of months, they start to develop a way of things. They start to move. And next thing you know, the rules will always be the foundation, but they're learning how to maneuver and find other ways to handle issues. And I want to mention something too. Remember, guys, and again, I know we're talking about real quick the rookies and the senior staff, is remember, their confidence at the very beginning of day one is going to come from external support and the rules and how it is that they run things. It's going to come from the rules because that's their fallback plan. If there's a concern, they need to lean on something to make a directive. So it's like, well, how do I know if this directive is right? And they're going to lean on the rules. And for stuff that's ambiguous, they're going to lean on support. So they haven't developed internal confidence or internal confidence. It's not. It's all external, you know. So again, I'm running a unit. I'm at the very beginning, an inmate's doing something, I got to push that directive. You know, automatically I go right to the rule book because that's what I know, and they done this is wrong, and it's very black and white at first, and it makes sense because that motivates them into making those directives and making those decisions. Now if there's a situation where I never encountered that wasn't taught to me, hey Joe, I need your help. Now Joe is the backup for the ambiguity. Now, granted, as you start to maneuver, because there's a lot of ambiguity, and they find themselves, you know, on the back end of solving those issues daily. After it lessens where they rely so much on the rule books. I mean, think about this, or external support. They start relying on themselves and their confidence. So think about yourself within 5 or 10 years. I'll be honest with you. Even though I may know the rules, I'm not constantly checking the rule book to enforce them. I just kind of know at this point. Like, what are you doing? Or even before they break it, what are you trying to do? Like, you know, you know it. You know it at this point because you've done it for so long. But again, I think at the very beginning, these are behaviors that are expected because this is where they start to develop their confidence. But my biggest thing is, and I think Joe will agree with this, is that if they know the rules at the very beginning or they're learning the rules, you know, and they can't say no when it's black and white and it's that simple, you know, for them at the very beginning, then I start to question, you know, as they start to move up, hey, this may not be for you, you know, because it's easy. Let me tell you something. The no's are easier to say when you know the rules back it. It's the yes that may be a bit harder because sometimes it could be, you know, it's like, hey, you know what, I can work with this person, but the no should be very easy to say. When you get to those ambiguous situations, if you can't say no when it's black and white and it's simple, I'll guarantee you an inmate will manipulate the shit out of you when it's ambiguous. And, you know, you're going to start having that yes mindset, which really doesn't work too well as an officer to an inmate. It just doesn't. You got to have that universal precaution because you could always change no to a yes. But, Joe, what's your thoughts on that? That was something I thought that we never expressed on this channel before.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I mean, yeah, the picture, the word "no" on my hand. You know, it's always easier to turn a no into a yes than it is to turn a yes into a no. You know, it's very important that, you know, you teach the rookie officers why the no is in place. You know, even through the academy, we give them the basic principles of what an inmate is allowed to do and what an inmate's not allowed to do, and why we have to give certain legalities and rights to offenders. But we don't teach them the individual processes as deep as we should in some instances, such as use of force, you know, inmate having too much food in his house, you know, some spoiled foods, you know, most people just look at stuff like that and see an over encumbrance. You know, we're looking at health values, safety values. You know, there's a lot of reasons for the word no, and it's not always just a policy, a security policy. It could be a risk management policy. It could be a medical health policy. And that's where it's very important that your senior staff that actually know the rules and policies, that not only have read them, studied them, enacted them, to pass that knowledge on to the rookie bosses, because not only are you empowering them, but you're also giving somebody a chance to step into your shoes when you're not there. You know, a clear no doesn't always dictate a final answer or the final answer to a question. You know, you can tell, you know, the boss says, hey, can we do this? And, you know, this offender wants me to do this. No. And then you just leave it at that. We're not telling this rookie officer why it's a no. No, we can't do this because he's got too much shit in his house. He's got spoiled food in his house. It's a health issue. We got to get that crap the hell out. No, they can't be in the day room without their shirts on. You know, yes, they have to be fully dressed. If they don't come out, it's a no. They don't come out fully dressed. It's a no because they have to be fully dressed. Why? Because we have females in the area and these guys are going to try you. You know, we need to make sure as senior staff, whether you're a CO, sergeant, lieutenant, because I mean, I've worked with sergeants and lieutenants that pretty much just got, I don't know, what do you want to call it, battlefield promotions. Because we were so short on staff, you know, they just happened to be the next name on the list, and they, you know, throw some wings on them or throw some bars on them and put them up in there. And then you find out, hell, they don't even know half the policies or how to apply them, and that's sad because we failed. Mm-hmm. You know, we promoted somebody up into that level, and you still don't know how to apply policy or what the policy is. That means we failed, mm-hmm. And that starts at the lowest level. We got to teach these rookie officers why. Because that not only does that empower them, it gives them the thirst for knowledge because now they know, you know, like the example I gave for the inmate having too much food in his cell. Okay, well, hell, if that's a medical issue or a risk management, maybe I need to start looking at some of this stuff and figure out why. And then, you know, that gives them the knowledge to start looking outside of your normal tunnel vision duties, and you get a better big picture perspective. You know, and I've said it before, you know, it's our job to give them the knowledge that they hunger for. Yeah. And, you know, the first one, and I've always said it, the academies, if you can't say no, write it on your hand because it's easier to turn a no into a yes later on down the road than it is a yes into a no.
Yeah. And Joe, what you're saying is spot on because also for the people that if you really want consistency, because consistency really does come in also application. The no, if you just tell people no and don't tell them why they're saying the no, then it becomes very specific driven. Well, I know they can't commit to that action, but when you do the why allows them to apply it elsewhere, depending on where that meaning fits in. You know, so I'm able to now take that meaning and filter it into other things that are, you know, not as specific as hey, say no to that. Why? Just tell him no. No, but I don't even know why the hell I'm telling him no, but I do know if he does it again, I'm going to tell him no. But there's value where, hey, let me tell you why I'm telling him no. Because A, B, and C, and D. And then all of a sudden, if you know that why in your head, A, B, and C, D may come when it's not that specific incident. It's something else. And you can say, hey, no. Why? Well, because blah, blah, blah. And then you start broadening that horizon of when that no needs to be applied. And I love that because, again, there's the consistency and all that too, because I think when you're taught the why, it opens up doors for higher level application as opposed to just you're saying no specifically for this. And it's like, well, you know, what about that? Well, teach them the why, because then the what about start to lessen. Because when you start teaching people the higher level why, what they're really asking when they say what about is they're trying to get what the why is. They're trying to figure out, well, what about? And then you got to find out where that common scenario is. And it's like, hey, well, I think what you're trying to get at is the why we do that is for A, B, C, D, and E. And all of a sudden, now it's no longer specifically driven. And as I mentioned, they see A, B, C, D, E. They know that's a no or a yes. Now, I want to mention one more thing because I want to talk about senior staff. Now, remember, when we talked about rookies working with newer boots, we allowed for some level of exception because, you know, when you have a rookie coming in, of course, you want the person to work at their highest of levels. But again, highest of levels at their first day is not going to be your highest of levels at 20 years. So be wary of that. You know, you're getting the person to work into their potential, not on day one have met their potential. So, you know, I when I say lower your expectations, I never at once said to lower the possibility of that employee. Just know for a fact you're dealing with an employee that's on their first day or two. So having said that, don't hold them to the same standard that you're going to hold somebody who's at day 20. What you do for that first person is cultivate them, see their potential, but don't treat them as if they've reached their potential already. Now, for senior staff, yes, there is some level of high expectations between each other because you've been on the job. You know, you should know some level of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. And yes, to be honest with you guys, the black and white of it all, let's say we're talking about the running of a housing unit, but you could find a way to apply this. The black and white of it all, you know, comes from the definitive actions the facility has to take and stuff that's guided by policy and procedures and rule books. I think for most part, not everything, obviously, nothing really has cut dry, but for the most part, I think where the job has its difficulties or where the job can be a bit tough is the interactions with the inmates or other humans, you know, your coworkers, whatever, because you're dealing with unpredictability at best. You know, so having said that, that's where you want to try to develop a system that kind of helps deal with that unpredictability. Like as Joe said, the higher level why to build some level of consistency, but know that you're going to deal with situations that are very unique. And when it's something new to you, I would like you to think that, let me go talk to Joe because I've never dealt with this before. Let's communicate with each other. Because we have this partnership where, let's see what we would want from each other on this. And that's what I mean. It's like if you got something new, what would Joe expect from me? What would I expect from Joe? But the key is, guys, for senior officers or for senior staff working together, departments, whatever, however you want to apply it, it's for people working together, the partnership there, you could develop an expectation based on that person's levels of experience. But the key with those expectations is also to allow for communication in between to keep fueling it. You know, don't think that once the expectations have been said that that you no longer have to talk. I think there are some things that will run smooth, as I mentioned before, because you've dealt with it. You know how to maneuver on that. But there are going to be some times where you're just going to have to keep on fueling and, you know, hey, that was new. Let me go back and see how Joe would have handled that. And let's see if we can build some consistency. But Joe, what's your thoughts on, you know, kind of what you expect from your senior? And I want to mention something too, guys. One last thing. I've done shows before and I've grown in my perspective where this officer runs things too soft. And it's like, okay, but I need to know how you run things because I need to know how you're qualifying that statement. Because that same officer that says that you're saying is running things too soft has now turned around and said to me, you're running things too strict. So having said that, sometimes that could be very subjective. And the only people that really understand this dynamic is really the two partners that really just have to sit down. Because me as the middleman, there's really not much I can do. But, hey, you know what? I can force you guys to talk to each other. But at the end of the day, how you run a unit and how, you know, it's going to be subjective based on your own biases. So if I'm running this unit super hard and Joe is just running it like a great officer that's got 20 years in, that just kind of manages things differently, doesn't manage by the pen, but gets stuff done because he's got that respect. My bias as a super strict officer calls Joe soft. Is Joe soft? No, he's not. But because I operate on this extreme, in my mind, Joe is. So as a supervisor, you mediate that dialogue. You know, it's like, hey, listen, I can't go by what Joe says. I can't go by what Anthony says because, you know, I don't know where they're at. Yeah, Anthony said Joe is so soft, but Anthony's fucking 20 years. He still leans on the rule book to run the unit. So maybe Anthony's too strict. And Joe comes to me and says, yo, I can't maneuver in this unit because Gangi's writing up charges every day, which doesn't give me any momentum to kind of set things in motion. Because as we're trying things, Gangi will be right behind, quickly writing them up when we fall backwards without giving me the chance to move things forward. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe? I know that's interesting. We could do a whole topic on that.
Us collectively as a whole, as far as corrections, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes when we teach these rookies or new boots that are coming in through the academy because, you know, the first thing that comes out of our mouths is generally, you know, always sweat the small shit so it doesn't turn into big shit. And without the follow through of telling them why, you know, it leads to those kind of, it leads, you know, you get that 2 week rookie officer in with a 20-year vet. And the rookie officer is writing cases on everything and anything, and you as a senior officer, by that time have kind of established yourself, and your verbal communication skills allow you to run it differently than without writing cases. That's where the tension comes in, because then the rookie officer feels like the supervisor put me with a lazy or a sorry senior officer. And, the senior officer is thinking, okay, dude, you need to calm down because you're doing too much. And that's where the communication needs to come in. And, you sit that boss down and you say, look, I know they have taught you to be strict, run it by policy, put that paper in their lives. And by all means, if it's something that is, worthy of the paper, anything in the penitentiary is worthy of paper. You can write an offense disciplinary on damn near anything. But, my job is to teach you when and where to apply that and save yourself the grief and gain momentum, gain respect. Because if you're spending 30 to 45 minutes, and I've seen these officers that spend as much as 2 hours writing up offenses for minor infractions that could have been taken care of verbally. And, for me, I kind of get on them senior officers. What are you doing? I sent them down there for you to teach. And I haven't seen him do anything because he's been sitting in a day room for the last 2 hours after rack time writing 35 disciplinaries. What are you doing? As a supervisor, you need to follow up and follow through with the rookie officers to make sure that the senior officer that you put them with is actually teaching them something, B is to follow through with that rookie officer and, by all means, let them write their disciplinaries. And then, within a week's time, have that discussion with them, say, hey, look, I notice you're writing a lot of disciplinaries, which is good. That means the inmates know that when you step on that pod, that wing, that cell block, whatever, they know that you mean business. But at the same time, you're spending so much time writing disciplinaries that you're neglecting some of your other duties, running your ins and outs, making sure that the cells are clean. You're neglecting some of your your primary duties that you need to do. How about we kind of throttle down a little bit on the disciplinaries? Let's spend more time walking the runs and using some verbal communication. And you're going to find out in the end that you're not only you gaining respect, but you're saving yourself a bunch of time and heartache as well. But, at the same token, you don't want to discourage him from writing cases, because then they're going to say, okay, Lieutenant Pomponio's friendly. His ass says he's not going to run it out here. He's not going to run a case that comes across him. He just, he's just not that lieutenant. That's, to me, it's the reason why that communication is so important between a rookie and a senior officer, because they kind of accept that kind of criticism better from a senior officer than they do a supervisor. Because if it comes from a supervisor up front, then they feel that they're being chastised, or they're being hammered or held back, and that's not what we want. We want our senior officers to go, you know what, you can write all the cases you want to, but if you don't communicate with these convicts, you're never going to have any respect. You're not going to have the respect of being able to walk on a tank. They see you and they automatically start taking T-shirts down or taking covers down off their lights. You can get that kind of respect by writing paper, but you're never going to have the same kind of respect if you don't utilize verbal communication to go with it.
Yeah, and remember that's again in the effort to move forward and cultivate the individual. Like when it comes to feedback, obviously horizontal feedback is going to be more impactful than vertical feedback, even though. Because vertical feedback, we get caught in survival mode because we're so concerned of the consequences. Like, yes, my supervisor thought I could do something better, but I was just so, I was so thinking I was getting in trouble that I know he gave me some great advice, but that was secondary compared to the fact that thank God I didn't get in trouble. But when you have the horizontal feedback, I think you're more open to hopefully trying to listen if you're open-minded, because there's also some people that just don't want any feedback, sadly. Like, who the hell are you to give me feedback when we work together? So again, it really depends on the mind of the person receiving it, but also the intent of the person who's delivering it. Like, if you're a supervisor and you got to give feedback, you got to provide feedback, one, instantaneously, but you can't always be negative. You got to balance shit with attaboys once in a while too, specific attaboys, because at the end of the day, oh, Pomponio wants to see you. If that shit's not balanced, they're going to dread you. You can't cultivate somebody by only dealing with the negatives. You have to also show them specific appreciation for the positives, so they're balanced when they come see you, where it's like, I'm not always going to the principal's office because, last time I was here, Joe also recognized me, the lieutenant recognized me for A, B, and C. Now, going back to, we kind of went back to the rookies real quick, but we were talking about the two senior officers or two senior staff members, supervisors that come into the unit. They can see when there's inconsistency. In some cases, obviously, the inconsistency could be seen with the inmate management when you walk into a unit and you can kind of see the sides are divided. But one thing that you could definitely tell when there's inconsistency is when you walk in and these two in front of you don't communicate. Literally, they don't communicate. And you could tell by that, just by maybe looking at certain things and like, well, what happened here? Well, your officer called in the count. Why didn't you call in yours? So he didn't have your back, or she didn't have your back, because it's not even just communicating to each other. It's partners have each other's back. So when you start to see that Gangi is falling downhill and Joe is at the highest of levels, the first thing I do as a supervisor, I may go to Joe and say, Joe, help me out with your partner here if you can. You guys have a good relationship. I would try for that first. And if Joe said, yo, that's not my job, I ain't beat for that because that guy is closed-minded, okay, then I'll get it. I'm not going to force Joe to do it. But if Joe could, I would like to see if Joe could do it before I have to do it. But then Absolutely. You have some people that will play their role because I don't like Gangi, But now there's also a deeper issue, because even if I do help Gangi, this relationship here is falling apart. So eventually I'm going to have to pull both people in the office and say, hey, guys, listen to me. This bullshit here, like, I want people to have each other's back. So the moment I went to Joe and Joe automatically pulled his work description when it came to having your back, that's a problem for me, because to me, I don't see that as work. I see that you're my brother. Of course I'm going to help you. But the moment the supervisor went to me, or I went to Joe and, and Joe's like, nah, well, I have a problem with that, because to me, we should want to do that. So now at that point, is it Gangi? Is it Joe? So again, the inconsistency, if I walk in as a supervisor, I want to be the last resort, but I also want to look at what's the outcome of also this inconsistency. Well, I got inmates right now that are not being managed in a consistent manner, which to me is the worst consequence of all, because it gives them avenues to circumvent. So if me and Joe aren't getting along, those cracks actually wind up giving the inmate the power of the unit, because when there's inconsistency between me and Joe and how we manage, inmates are always going to be able to find an answer that's more favorable to them. And again, as a supervisor, if I walk in and see that, and it's something that you see, it's also something that you feel, just even as I said, the lack of communication between the two in the unit, I'm going to talk to those individuals and I'm going to basically put them in the same room together. I've had people, oh wait, one last thing, guys. So consistency and expectations is not always easy, because you're going to deal with people that really don't get along, but at the end, you still got to be professional, and you guys still got to work together. But sometimes you have to bring these people into a room together, and people are so afraid of conflict. I don't care. I don't care, because I'm not going to let the ship fall apart, because what I'll do is, hey, guys, you're no longer being productive. So this is kind of letting you know that if you guys don't start communicating, I'm not here to take sides. You're both getting written up. And that's it. Because I'm not here to babysit you as you babysit the inmates. I'm here to help you as adults, but not sit here and deal with the fact that you two aren't getting along. And then eventually the productivity in this area starts to fall. Now I'm being called down. They're asking me, you know, how come I'm not able to manage you two and that you guys haven't spoken for a while? And I've worked with people that had to work in close quarters. I oversaw them and they didn't get along. And I'm going to tell you something. No matter what people think, when you don't start getting along and, you know, you're not communicating, work slowly starts to fall backwards because not everything can be easily handled. There has to be communication. But once you start seeing things start to slip back, and then when you go back, you start seeing people doing the, you know, it's them, it's not my job, it's their job. It's like, hey, guys, this used to be so fluid. We knew when to pick things up and run the ball and then pass the ball off. Now, you guys don't communicate with each other. No one's picking up the ball when it falls into those cracks. You know, because let me tell you something. In corrections, we got cracks. We got things that happen. You need someone to pick up the ball. And when you have two partners that are consistent and they work well together, the ball never drops. They pick it up, they pass it off. They pick it up, they pass it off. And then one day you're walking in and it's like, dude, the ball's right in front of me. What the hell's happening, guys? It's like, well, they stopped talking to each other. Really? And then you will start to see that when they stop talking to each other, the stuff that fall in the cracks get ignored and they go right back to playing their specific role. And watch how limiting that becomes when they start playing what that role is without allowing for the blending of those components. Part of the expectations are always going to be, for me as a supervisor, now this goes above the two partners in the unit, but my expectation for me as a supervisor is, do I have people that know when to step up and step away? Yes, I'm good. Because then there's no area that's ever going to fall unanswered. But when you have people that don't get along, there's nobody stepping up. And then you're walking in and shit has been falling apart for a while. And then everybody's quick to say, well, that was Joe. That was Gangi. That was Joe. That was Gangi. Guys, this never happened before. I never had it where, you know, we had Joe's concerns and Gangi's concerns. Because at the end of the day, we used to say, that's on me. No matter what happens, if the unit was to fall apart, that's on us. If Joe fucked up, Joe, that's on me too. And if Gangi fucked up, that's on me. Now it's like, that's Gangi and that's Joe. That's a problem. That's a problem. And that will kill the ultimate operations of that facility slowly, but it will kill it if it's not correct. And that's when I start holding the supervisor, because I will ask that supervisor, do you know that these guys that have been running this unit, I just actually, you know, we had to call them down, whatever it was, and we had to give them both charges. Do you know that these two officers haven't been talking for months? You couldn't sense that when you walked in the unit? Because how did it get to this far? Because again, it's the smallest things. And as a supervisor, you know, you sense it. But sometimes a lot of these supervisors don't want to step up because they don't want to deal with the conflict. It's like, yeah, there's going to be conflict, but let me tell you something. That conflict is not to take sides. I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to put you both on. Well, I know you're closer to Joe and you don't want to get Joe mad. Sorry, guys, this is professional now. Joe, Gangi, come here. I'm done. This is where we're going to be at. And this is the end result. You guys are slipping up. This is what I want. Well, why? Well, where was the conflict? Well, usually it's a conflict is because it's selfish, because you don't want to go ahead and, you know, make yourself feel uncomfortable. Welcome to being a supervisor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing on all this?
Man, there's a lot there on that last baby.
Go ahead. Say
you bit off a bunch there. You know, it definitely, if you were the type of supervisor who is afraid of confrontation, that job is not for you. Because I don't care if you're a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, warden, senior warden, there's going to be confrontation. Sometimes it's a necessary evil. You know, and as Gangi said, when you have two people that don't communicate with each other and they display that behavior in front of the offender population, that's where manipulation happens, because they're going to play one against the other. And that's something I never tolerated. You know, you're going to have to nip that in the bud. You're going to have to call them down there, sit them down, make them communicate, and make them aware that they're gonna communicate with each other. They're gonna perform the job functions. You don't have to like the person outside the gate, but inside this gate, we're gonna act as a team. No ands, ifs, or buts. We're gonna act as a team. And if they can't handle that, then, you know, it's time to do something a little more formal to get the point across. Because if you don't nip that in the bud, and somebody above you in rank has to come down there and get in your business, that means you're not conducting your business. You know, when somebody higher up the food chain, such as a captain or a major or hell, even a warden, can come down there and notice that your two officers haven't said a single word to each other, but yet they're performing job duties and they're not talking to each other at all. It's abnormal, very abnormal. And if somebody above you can come down and see that, then that means you're not conducting your business. It's your job to nip that in the bud and get that out of the way, because if you allow that kind of, not so much confrontation, but tension to brew between two people because they don't like each other. I don't give a damn if you like each other or not. But behind this gate, you guys are going to act like you're, you know, Batman and Robin. Outside the gate, I don't care if you like each other. And the whole reasoning behind that is because offenders are there 24 hours a day. They see you drive up in the parking lot. They know what kind of car you drive. They know everything about you. They know more about you than you do. And if they sense a wedge of any kind between two people, man, they are all over that. And when you allow the offender manipulation process to start, then you got problems that turn into, they compound on you, and it's harder to get that back. You didn't, you know, as a supervisor, in closing, as a supervisor, you need to make sure that your people are communicating. You need to make sure that you're communicating with your people, and you do need to make sure that your officers are communicating with each other. Regardless whether they like each other or not, it doesn't matter. Behind the gates, you guys are one team and one team only. You don't allow them to, you know, display their objectivity or their contempt for another officer, especially in an offender's presence. Man, that was one of my pet peeves. Yeah. You know, you got to, you know, there's times in the penitentiary, regardless whether they're your friends or not, you got to be confrontational. Because ultimately, you know, the operations of that facility is not going to fall on the officer. Yeah, they may fall on them disciplinary wise, but guess who winds up taking the heat for everything? The shift supervisors, because it's your shift, it's your penitentiary at that time. And if you don't have control of your own house, how the hell are they supposed to have faith in you to do your abilities and to perform your job functions and excel above your capabilities if you can't even control what you got underneath you right now? Don't be afraid of confrontation. I mean, we hurt people's feelings every day. You know, hell, I hurt my kids' feelings for 18 years until they finally moved out of the house. But they're better adults for it, you know, and they know I'll have their back in a heartbeat. That's the key. I spent most of my time putting my foot up their ass, but they knew I would have their back in a heartbeat. You know, and it's the same thing in the workforce. It's not only corrections, anywhere you work. You got to have that well-oiled machine. You can't have open display of contempt between employees, in front of customers, or in front of offenders. Because once you allow that process to happen, you've opened yourself up for a multitude of problems.
Yeah, and you know what, guys, real quick too, and by the way, great closer. Personal conflicts brings everybody else down with it. I mean, I don't have time for personal conflicts. I'll forward it to ED because I'm just not. You know, you guys have to be professional. It just drains you. Personal conflicts will drain you. They bring everybody else into it. And next thing you know, they wind up being okay. And then the supervisor gets pulled into some bullshit. It's just very, it's just negative. Now, guys, just again, when it comes to consistency or it comes to working with a partner, I mean, obviously key is always going to be communicating with each other. Supervisors, you know, communicating with each other is actionable. It's something that's seen. This is something that you need to fuel. You know, you want to keep that going because for some reason, guys, working in corrections, the norm of a facility is not always going to be at the top best of operations. It's going to be usually always going towards something like convenient or even at some level isolation and silos. So we have to always do what we can to keep feeding the good momentum, you know, the positive momentum. You know, if we see people coming together, you know, let's keep fueling that. That's, you know, yeah, you know, you're not micromanaging, you're adding fuel, you know, keep the fuel going, keep the communication going. The moment you see it's not happening, let's have it. Let's do something to make it happen. You know, if worst comes to worst, I've done it where when we don't have people, like I feel like we're not communicating, we have department meetings. We do whatever we could just to keep, you know, things in the loop, because the longer you're not doing it, that starts becoming the accepted norm. And to be honest with you guys, that's not something that you can even sit back on, because it's just easier not to do it. That's why you have to do it, and just keep on building that as a habit. And then when people start coming into the facility or working at that agency, they're moving with it. You know, they're picking up the pace and they're moving with it, because, you know, again, if you're not fueling that pace, it just slows down. And then, you know, the little snowball becomes what is it? Like a little boulder of snow, a big boulder of snow that just wipes out everything. Remember, guys, momentum can go both ways, positive and negative. So your job is to keep the positive momentum going and don't let it fall back so much where the greater speed is going backwards. And that's where the momentum is now headed. Because eventually, if you don't keep fueling that, you will find a facility that acts on convenience, complacent, and just in silos, believe it or not. As always, guys, the show is tipped. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Guys, check out those online webinars. And as always, guys, stay safe.